What's up, guys? Welcome back to another edition of the Quick Bricks NBA DFS podcast, brought to you by the good guys over at Fantasy to Gins. As always, Sean Mitchell here at SMitchell17. This is your special Saturday edition. We have 9 games on the main slate, a couple games during the early times, but I will not be covering those. Just going to go over the 9 games. It's a really nice slate. I woke up, felt good. Felt I'd go ahead and give you guys a pod for today. Get out what kind of what I've found. I'm on the playbook over at Fantasy Alarm for those folks. So a lot of good stuff, man. This is a really good slate. Again, 9 games. Go ahead and hop right into it. Talk about the matchups a little bit, the pace, the spread, the totals. Some pretty good totals on this one. I only have one game that we do not have a total, and that is the Celtics and Bulls. Waiting to see if Cantor's going to play. He got some stitches in his chin last night, so he could ultimately be ruled out. Let's go ahead and jump into it, though. Utah going into Orlando in the earliest game. Utah minus 3.5 here on the road, 208 on the total. Utah coming in as the 25th fastest team over the last 10. Orlando just the 20th. Utah is kind of reverted back to their old ways. They had played with a lot of pace for a while. Now they're kind of falling back into the mean where they probably should be. In the latter part. Orlando has been a slow team all year long, so that one's not going to change. So that is the lowest total on the board right now. It's not really a game that we're going to want to look to target, obviously. Next game on the docket, we got Pacers going into Atlanta to play the Hawks. Indiana minus 7.5 here, 220.5 on the total. Indiana coming in as the 24th fastest over the last 10 games. Atlanta, number 1 still. The Hawks been playing with lots of pace. They're on a back-to-back as well, so that's interesting. I forgot to mention that the Magic are also on a back-to-back. Last night they got Aaron Gordon back. That helped them quite a bit. Again, Pacers and Hawks, it's a massive pace-up spot here for Indiana, who is also without Malcolm Brogdon. A couple of good spots in that game, obviously. We're going to definitely look to target that one because John Collins could also be sitting for Atlanta. He kind of had some injury last night, I believe, so that one's one to monitor. Obviously, Jabari Parker would benefit the most, I would say, off of if he does ultimately get ruled out. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Thunder at the Cavaliers. OKC minus 6.5 coming in as a road favorite here. 212 on the total. OKC 27th fastest over the last 10 games. Cleveland 19th. A couple good spots in this one I like. It's not a really high total game, but it has some really good spots. Celtics at the Bulls. Again, this one doesn't have a total, but it has a spread. Boston coming in as a 1.5 point road favorite here in Chicago. Boston 22nd in terms of pace over the last 10. Chicago 17th. This is not really a game I think I'm going to want to get in. You have two really good defensive teams. It just doesn't scream great for fantasy. However, it is kind of a close spread here. The total, I believe, will be under 220. I'm going to say this one will be in the 216 to 215ish range. That's my prediction. I'm not sure. There's a lot of other games that I like. So rolling on, Nuggets at the Wizards. Denver minus 10.5 here on the road. 223 on the total. Denver 29th. They continue to be one of the slowest teams in the league. Washington is 10th. We know they're fast. Sorry, guys. Had to cut off for a minute. I had to sneeze. Anyway, we know that Washington is really fast. They're on a back-to-back here. They have been without Bill. He's had again last night. Jordan McRae absolutely erupted. The guy's just, he had a 40.5% usage rate last night, to put that into perspective. Nonetheless, get Denver here. Denver is also obviously a really good defensive team, but this still is a really high spread. This is a massive pace-up spot for the Nuggets. Obviously, we're going to have to look at this game. Hornets at the Mavericks. Dallas minus 11.5, 216.5 on the total. Charlotte ranked dead last in terms of pace over the last 10. Dallas is 12th. So you get a nice little pace-up spot here for Charlotte, but it is a big spread, and Charlotte is not very good. Pistons at the Warriors. Detroit minus 2.5 here on the road, 214.5. Detroit 15th over the last 10 in terms of pace. Golden State 14th. This one's a pretty interesting game. We got Drummond back. He's not, no injury designation. Willie Cauley-Stein is questionable. D'Angelo Russell continues to be out. This is I like this spot. I like the game. I think it'll actually have pretty decent flow, except, the total's not up there. The Pistons have actually been running with a little bit more pace lately, so that's really interesting. 2 games left. Spurs at the Bucks. Milwaukee minus 12.5 here at home, 227 on the total. San Antonio, 9th over their last 10 in terms of pace. Milwaukee 4th. So you have a really nice, fast-paced game here. I really like this game. Obviously, it should be very popular. It's the highest total on the board. and it's, there's a lot of good spots in it. The Spurs have already rolled out Dejounte Murray, so, Patty Mills, Derek White are going to get a bump. I really like LaMarcus Aldridge. Once again, Giannis, you got to like him. And then you have your late night hammer. You got the Pelicans going on a back-to-back going into Sacramento after they just faced off with the Lakers last night, only lost by 10, ran with them for pretty much the whole game. Who knows if they come out flat. Sacramento could really jump on them quick here, I can see. Sacramento, a small 2.5-point favorite, 223 on the total. We know the Pelicans run with a lot of pace, as they're 13th over the last 10 in terms of pace. Sacramento 26th, they are not, so this is a really good pace-up spot for Sacramento. You get a little revenge narrative here with Buddy Hield and his old team, the Pelicans. So I really like Buddy Hield, by the way. So that is the kind of a rundown of the games. Talk about the spreads and the totals, the pace. Let's go ahead and hop right into the positionals here. We're going to start with the point guard. Luka Doncic, 12.4. Don't really have to extend. Over 60 fantasy points in his last 3 or 4, 30 or more minutes in his last 7 of 8. They are a big favorite. I know that people are going to still rush to play Luka. However, I feel like this is a night that you do not have to. It's not a must. It's not a must-play Luka night. There's a lot of good games, and there's a lot of good plays on this slate. So Luka is absolutely always in play, but he is not a must-play. Let me go ahead and say that. Trae Young at 9.5. Again, I said yesterday that you weren't going to see him at a 9.2 price tag once again. He's already up $300. Wait till after tonight's game, and he's going to be over 10K where he should be. Indiana has allowed 115 or more points per game over their last 5 of 6 games to opponents. They're not playing really good defense. Malcolm Brogdon continues to be out. That Aaron Holiday, every one of their starters has over a 110 average defensive rating over the last 5 games, which is not good. Trae Young could absolutely torch him tonight. To put that into perspective, Jamal Murray just put 42 on him in Indiana. So if that says anything for you, Trae Young could go for 60 plus tonight is my prediction, and he's probably one of my favorite point guards. Devontae Graham at 7.6 would be my next one. 38 or more in his last 4 or 5. He's put up 38, 43, 48.3, 47.5 in his last 4 games there. He's just really been good. He's really been consistent. Charlotte is in a good spot tonight, I would say. So I really like some Devontae Graham. I think his price is just right. He more than likely he stays on the floor. He's played 35 or more minutes in like his last 11 of 12 games. He's carrying right under a 22.5% usage rate at 22.4 over his last 5 games. So Devontae Graham, I'm a fan of. Jamal Murray, as I mentioned earlier, at 7.5K tonight, 38, or he put up 38, played 38 minutes, put up 42 fantasy points against Indiana in his last game out. He's now put up over 41 fantasy points in his last 2 of 3 on the road. We get Washington here on a back-to-back, who's allowing the 5th most fantasy points to that point guard spot over the last 10. We know they're struggling. IT got ejected after 1 whole minute last night, which was a bunch of bullshit. I hope that ref has the dirty runs today, because I had one IT lineup and it actually would have done really fucking good if he wouldn't have got rolled out. Nonetheless, it's neither here nor there. It's in the past. But we will be looking at playing some Jamal Murray at 7.5, especially in tournaments. I really think he's borderline cash tonight. It's a really good spot. Just really hope that Washington can stay afloat. Bill's probably not going to play again. Again, they've got just a plethora of injuries. So moving on, Dennis Schroeder at 6.1. Just been playing really good. He's averaging over 30 minutes a game. He's played over 31 minutes in his last 13. He's put up over 31 fantasy points in his last 5 of 7. Over 28 fantasy points in his last 9 straight. We know Cleveland is not that great against the point guard spot. He's going to get all the second unit run, of course, as he usually does. He's been finishing out games too, so interestingly enough. Dennis Schroeder, John Mpimba has been beating that drum for a while. And his price hasn't moved. So props to John, and yeah, he's still a good play and will be a good play once again tonight. Lonzo Ball at 6.5K. Sacramento allowing the 8th most fantasy points to the point guard spot over the last 10. He put up 37.5 and 65 in his last 2. 22.7% usage rate in his last 2. And he's had a 119.6 offensive rating over his last 2 games. So he's been playing really well, obviously. Put up 37.5 last night against his old team in the Lakers. I'm not really sure how much he'll get up for this game. But nonetheless, I wish his price was more like under 6K. But I think you still got to look at him here. It's the late night hammer. It has a big total. Actually, the second, second highest total on the board. So you got to kind of look at it. Kings struggle against the point guard spot. We know that. De'Aaron Fox is not the greatest defender, and this is kind of one of those first round draft pick versus first round draft pick type deal here with Ball and De'Aaron Fox. So this should be a good matchup. Aaron Holiday at 5.6 will continue to start. He's played over 30 minutes in his last 6 of 7 nonetheless. Over 26 fantasy points in his last 4 or 5. He gets a nice pace of spot here against Atlanta. Seth Curry at 5K. Not just a major fan of paying 5K for Seth Curry, but he's really played well. 31 minutes last game, 33 fantasy points, over 23 minutes in his last 4, over 21 fantasy points in his last 3 of 4. He has his spurts. He's really a tournament flyer. Would never touch him in cash because he's just too inconsistent. You don't know. Carlisle is a freak, and his minutes range, and Seth Curry's minutes range also. So something just to watch out for. You know, they are going to be without Kristaps Porzingis again, so and Tim Hardaway Jr., which obviously has created more time for these guys. Dalen Wright has kind of fell through the cracks. He hadn't been playing a lot of minutes, hadn't been playing really well. It's been Seth Curry, and you know, I don't even think Jalen Brunson's been playing that good. So, you know, Isaiah Thomas at 4-9, if you want to go there, kind of a little bit of a revenge spot here against his old team in Denver. He played for a couple seasons. Of course, he only played 1 minute last night, so he should be well rested. TJ McConnell at 4.8 has been getting good run, obviously, as well, without Brogdon behind Aaron Holiday. 25 or more minutes in his last 3. He's put up 16, 31.5, and 25.8 in his last 3. You know, Atlanta, nice pace spot again, of course. He's going to get all the second unit run against, you know, like Brandon Goodwin, or whatever the hell his name is. So that's one you can look at. Darius Garland at 4.6 played 34 more minutes in his last 2 games. In his last 4 or 5, he's put up 24.3, 27.5, 22, and 35 points. And OKC is allowing the 4th most fantasy points to the point guard spot over their last 10. He's had at least 1 steal in his last 4 games. He's had at least 4 assists in his last 2 games. Has looked kind of really good lately. So Darius Garland, I think, is a nice flyer at 4.6K. Like I said, 34 minutes in his last 2 is pretty good. Patty Mills, of course, at 3.6 should get the start, I would imagine. He's pretty much a free square. Got the fastest pace game on the board here with San Antonio and Milwaukee, and you know, Patty Mills at 3.6. So that's obviously going to be a play. And then Brandon Goodwin, what I was talking about with Atlanta on a back-to-back, he could see more minutes. Nonetheless, 13 minutes and 22 minutes in his last 2. In the 13-minute game, he was still able to manage to put up 21.5 fantasy points. And then in the 22-minute game, he put up 40.3. That game was without Trae Young, and he only played 22 minutes and put up 40 fantasy points. So 26.2% usage rate in his last 2, leads the team. Or actually, he's behind Trae Young. So that one's interesting at 3.6 if you want to look there. Moving over to the shooting guard spot, we have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I do not believe that I'm going to be paying up for Donovan Mitchell. I don't really like the spot. I don't really like his price. So I'm going to go ahead and go down to Gilgeous-Alexander here at 7.5 for my top play at shooting guard. Over 43 in his last 3. Over 40 fantasy points in his last 6 of 8. We know Cleveland struggles mightily against the shooting guard spot. Colin Sexton couldn't guard a fly. 26.8% usage rate in his last 5. Only behind Dennis Schroeder. So, Jaylen Brown at 7.4 is my next play. Over 40 fantasy points in his last 5 of 7, 26.5% usage rate over his last 5. Been playing really well. I really liked him last night. He balled out again. Buddy Hield at 7-1 I think is going to be a staple play, definitely in GPPs. Obviously, it's a great spot against New Orleans here in a fast-paced game at home. Over 42 fantasy points in his last 2 of 3. Over 34 fantasy points in his last 4. Nice pace, and we know New Orleans struggles versus guards. So, Buddy Hield is one of my favorite shooting guard plays. I put DDR in here because on FanDuel he's a shooting guard. He's under 7K. He's at 6.7. If you saw my tweet from yesterday, I believe, or the day before, it's just silly that the way they price him. He's you know, 37 or more fantasy points in his last 4 or 5. He's got a 28.6% usage rate, leads the team. And he's 6.7K in the fastest paced game on the board. So give me all the DDR. Damian Lee at 6.5. He's still priced up. He's put up a dud last game. But if you look at his home games, he's really showed a big difference in home and road splits. In his last 5 home games, 34.5, 38.5, 54.3, 29.3, 32.3. All of those were home games. His last 2 on the road have been crap. Damian Lee, I'm totally fine with. Again, he's going to continue to see minutes. Not really sure if Willie Cauley-Stein is sitting, but they're still without D'Angelo Russell, so they're still down at the guard play, and he will continue to see minutes. Jeremy Lamb at 6.4. Atlanta is allowing the 6th most fantasy points to shooting guard spot over the last 10 games. He just played 37 minutes, put up 45 fantasy points last game. Brogdon out, of course, helps him. 29.9% usage without Brogdon. He's put up 11, 12, and 13 field goal attempts in his last 4, or 3 of 4, sorry. So that's pretty encouraging. Lamb gets a really good spot here against Atlanta. We know they struggle against the shooting guard spot. It's a really good spot for Lamb. Fast-paced game. Alec Burks at 6K, 25.2% usage rate, leads the team. 40 or more in his last 3 of 6. Detroit versus guards is always something we look to fade, so that one obviously will be something we can look at. Jordan McRae didn't have his price go up hardly any. He's 5.7. Had a 40.5% usage rate last night. Took 26 field goal attempts. He took 26 shots. That's like DAR type stuff. Put up 50.3 fantasy points. This is not going to be that easy of a game. He's probably not going to be able to put up 50 because he's likely going to see Gary Harris, who is a decent defender. Nonetheless, though, you kind of got to look at him at 5.7. I mean, it should be a faster pace game, pace-up spot here for Denver, and he's the guy that's been the guy. I mean, without Bill, it's been McRae. He's been the play. He will continue to be the play. Marcus Smart at 5.4, 46.5 last night. Played 36 minutes. As Kimba is out, so he's going to continue to start, so he's going to continue to see good minutes. He's a really good play over on FanDuel because of his steals upside, but I'm a fan of him on either side. So he'll play Marcus Smart. Kevin Huerter at 5. Huerter, whatever the fuck his name is. Kevin Huerter for the Hawks. 5.3, 38 in back-to-back games now. 38 fantasy points. He's put up 12, 13, and 17 field goal attempts in his last 3. Very encouraging. They need somebody else to score for them. Now they're going to be without Collins, so Huerter could obviously see a really nice usage bump. They are on a back-to-back. I really think nobody plays him, and this is a really good spot at 5.3. So Kevin Huerter, I'm a fan of. And Gary Harris, I think you got to kind of look at it. 4.7. Washington allowing the 5th most fantasy points to that shooting guard spot over the last 10. He's put up 24 or more fantasy points in his last 3 of 5. His last 3 road games, he's had 31.3, 24.3, and 15.5. So, I mean, not the greatest, not the worst. We see the floor there. 15.5 is not what we want. But this is a really good spot for him, and it's a pace-up spot, and I could see him getting more involved in this game. Terrence Ross at 4.3 had finally one of his big games last night. Went for 34.5 fantasy points in 25 minutes. Utah is allowing the 7th most fantasy points to that shooting guard spot over the last 10. Ross will probably more than likely continue to see nice minutes now that John Isaac is out. And they got Aaron Gordon back again last night, but, Terrence Ross usually plays better at home. He had a big game last night. I would continue to play him now, especially at home. Etuan Moore has gotten run over the last couple of games. He's only 4.2 tonight. He's played 22 or more minutes in his last 4 or 5. He put up 40.8 fantasy points in the game before the last one. And he's taken 10, 20, 14 field goal attempts in his last 3 or 4. So Etuan Moore is shooting a lot lately. You get the Pelicans on a back-to-back here. He could easily see another 22-plus minutes, and at 4.2, he has nice upside. We've seen that where he put up 40 fantasy points 2 games ago. So if you want to look at that, I'm totally fine. And also another flyer is Dwayne Bacon at 3.8. Nikolai Batum has been a healthy scratch the last 4 games, and Bacon has been one of the guys that's seen extended run. He's played 18 minutes and 28 minutes in his last 2 games. He's put up 18.3 fantasy points and 24.8 fantasy points in those 2. This is if Dallas gets up big, Bacon could see even more extended run. So this is a good spot for Bacon, I think, if you want to go there, especially in tournaments. Going over to the small forward spot, Giannis at 11.5, sure. Brandon Ingram at 8.5. He's priced basically at value, but he's solid, he's consistent. 44 or more in his last 5-7, 34 plus minutes in his last 8. Chris Middleton at 7.5, 32 plus minutes in his last 3. He's put up 33, 42, 41, 44, and 51 in his last 5. So he's been balling really good. Gets a nice spot here against San Antonio. Will Barton at 7.3 has been getting it done. He's put up 40, 38, 33, 44 in his last 4. He hasn't been like scoring a lot of points. He just does everything else really good. Gets a good spot here, of course, against Washington. Joe Ingles at 6.1. Orlando without John Isaac. This is probably helps him quite a bit. 30 more minutes in his last 10, over 32 fantasy points in his last 4 or 5. Joe Ingles can he can just constantly consistent, and he's just more of a cash game play than a tournament play. His upside's kind of capped. He's got too much around him with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. So more of a cash play on Ingles. TJ Warren at 5.7, over 30 fantasy points in his last 3 of 5, 29 or more minutes in his last 5. Of course, they have no Brogdon, and Atlanta is absolutely terrible against the small forward spot. So TJ Warren is definitely a nice play as well. He's put up over 30 fantasy points in his last 2 I know of. Michael Porter Jr. could get some extended run. Obviously, he's 4K. 23 and 26 minutes in his last 2 of 3, 23, 29, 33.3 fantasy points in his last 3 of 4. He's been getting it done, and the coach has been, Malone wants to play him. He wants to play him more minutes. He could easily see more minutes tonight against Washington for sure. So that one's one you need to keep in your back pocket. He's really cheap. Going over to the power forward spot, Sabonis at 8.9. He gets the biggest bump in usage without Brogdon. He's put up 47 fantasy points in his last 2. We know Atlanta struggles against bigs. So, especially without Collins now, Sabonis should absolutely ravish this Hawks team. He is priced up, but he's worth it. Kevin Love at 7.3, I think, is back in play. 37, 41, 42, and 50 in his last 4 at home. OKC allowing the 8th most fantasy points to that power forward spot over the last 10. I already said that I really like LaMarcus Aldridge, and I really, really like LaMarcus Aldridge at 7.2. 46, 45.5, 51 in his last 3. Milwaukee is allowing the 4th most to the power forward spot over the last 10, and the 2nd most to the center spot over their last 10. He's put up 37 or more in his last 3 on the road. LaMarcus Aldridge is absolutely in play. Gallinari at 6.5, over 30 minutes in his last 12 games, over 29 fantasy points in his last 4 or 5. Cleveland allowing the number 1 most fantasy points to the power forward spot over the last 10 games. So Gallinari is in play again. Lauri Markkanen at 6.3. Boston allowing the 9th most of the power forward spot over the last 10. 29 or more in his last 5 of 6. Over 33 fantasy points in his last 4 of 6. Lauri has been playing really well lately, and he's really he's cheap. He's cheap. Gets Boston on a back-to-back here. Like the spot quite a bit. Maxi Kleber at 5.9. 31 and 35 minutes in his last 2. They do not have Kristaps Porzingis. He did start the second half of their last game for Dwight Powell. So Kleber at 5.9 is absolutely in play. His price is not lovely, but if he's going to play over 30 minutes, we've seen what he can do. He's put up 32 and 38 fantasy points in those last 2. We know Charlotte struggles against bigs, so it's not a bad spot. I'm probably going to butcher the fuck out of this guy's name, the Domboya for Detroit, who started last game for Blake Griffin, played 27 minutes, put up 27 fantasy points, put up a double-double with 10 points and 11 rebounds. So obviously he's going to be in play because Griffin is still out. Again, Jabari Parker at 4.9. No Collins should get the extended run here for the Hawks. He's 4.9. He's really cheap. Hopefully he can see 28 plus minutes. Moving over to the center spot, Drummond at 9.9. No designation again. It's a great spot against Golden State here. 50 or more in his last 2 of 3 on the road. I don't have to extend on Drummond. He's an excellent play, especially under 10K. Nikolai Jokic at 9.4. If you want to go there, Washington is allowing the most fantasy points to the center spot over the last 10. Jokic has not been playing well. I would probably not advise to pay up for him tonight. Just for the simple fact that Washington on a back-to-back going against a really good team in Denver, I don't really like paying that kind of price for him. Nikolai Vucevic at 7.9, 47 again last night. He continues to stay under 8K. I don't know why. But, of course, he sees the biggest bump without, John Isaac, without, they got Aaron Gordon back, like I mentioned, but, they run their offense through Vucevic. So, at 7.9, I'm totally fine with him. Derek Favors at 7.3. Not really sure how they're going to use him on the back-to-back here. I'm kind of worried. He played 34 minutes last night. But he's put up 36 or more fantasy points in his last 5 games. He's put up 45, 37, 36, 43, and 38 in those 5. Derek Favors has been playing really well. I'm just worried about him on a back-to-back. So kind of keep that one in your, in your back pocket if he does start and play. I mean, it's going to be hard to fade at 7.3. In a good spot here against the Kings. Brook Lopez, San Antonio allowing the 6th most to the center spot over the last 10. He's put up 33 or more in his last 3 of 5. Gets a nice pace spot here. Fast-paced game. should benefit Brolo. San Antonio does give up fantasy points to the center spot, so I think I like him a little bit. And then Daniel Tice at 3.8. Canner could sit possibly. He got some stitches in his chin last night, so he also, Tice played, pretty well. 3.8K, he put up 29.5 fantasy points last night, 24 minutes. He's going to probably see 25 or plus minutes if Canner doesn't play. So he's going to have to be one you're going to have to look at definitely in cash at 3.8. So that is it. That is your Saturday edition of the Quick Bricks NBA DFS podcast. Hope you guys enjoy. We'll talk a little bit later. Enjoy your Saturday.